Hello and welcome to another Simplification Patterns video. So in this video, I'm going to try and do 10 problems at least where you simplify down into a winning endgame. I seem to have gotten a pretty good response in the previous videos that are like this, the simplification patterns. So let me know if you want more of these, if you would like to see other types of videos. And also if you want more or less difficult problems. Okay, so here we just had a rook capture white's pawn up here, which looks like it would allow us to take. But if we do that, this pawn will promote. So that doesn't seem too great for us. We need to make a decision here. Okay, I just solved this. Pause the video at any time if you need to take more time to think, if you want to calculate a little bit more. But what would you do in this position? We can go after this rook, but then the pawn will promote to a queen here. But there is something that could save us here. Notice how our king is in opposition to the opponent's king. So the king cannot run to any of these squares in between. So once the pawn promotes, we can swing back over, deliver a check. The king will have to move onto the line of the queen here. So it'll probably move down close to the queen. Then we can take. Well, once we check, the king will have. All right, here, let's take a look at this. From the beginning, we're going to take. The pawn will promote. We will swing back over, delivering a check. The king will move down close to the queen, either here or here. Then we go back to where we were, delivering a check to the king, and when the king moves, then we can pick off the promoted queen, and we'll have these extra pawns. So here we go. Capture, check, check again, take, and now we're just winning. After the king captures, we have two pawns that can move up the board and get a queen. All right, on to the next problem here. How can we simplify down? First thing you want to do before deciding to simplify down is to make sure that you're ahead in material, and if you do simplify down, you'll go into a winning end game. Otherwise, if you're behind in material, you want to avoid simplifying down. So white here should avoid trading down. Okay. You want to look for checks. Checks, captures, and threats in that order. And I always mention this because it's very important. One overlooked check can make all the difference in a position. And if we don't have any checks, which the only check we have here is that, I mean, is that even a possibility? If we go there, we're forking the king and the queen. If we have a capture, pawn captures, we have doubled pawns, then this passed pawn could be dangerous. But maybe that's the way to go. because our king would be able to come over and stop that pawn, and this one, uh, okay, yeah, this one would just march up the board. Make sure I'm looking at this from the right viewpoint. We are on black side of the board here. So that would really simplify things down. If we go there, check, forking, king and queen. Now the king could move. I guess the queen doesn't have to capture, but then we could capture. Then this pawn will be passed. But then again, we'll have this passed pawn over here that'll queen first. So I think that could be the way to go. Check. If the queen captures, we capture. Then if this pawn starts running, we'll be able to stop it. We can start pushing our pawn. So there we go. And the way, here's a simple way, especially for beginners, to tell if you can stop a passed pawn. You draw a line down here to the edge of the board, and you create a square. And this is called the square of the pawn. And if your king is inside that square, you'll be able to stop that pawn from promoting. And likewise, we can do that for this pawn. And create a square, and we see that there's no way for that king to get into that square. It would take 3 moves just to get into the square, and by then, as the pawn moves up the board, the square gets smaller and smaller, and it would not be possible to stop it. All right, on to the next problem here. We have a rook pressing forward, attacking our rook. Now, once again, we may have to use the square of the pawn technique to see if that pawn can make it up the board. So, if we take pawn takes, we're in the square of the pawn, so our king would be able to stop that pawn. And we don't even have to move. We can start pushing our pawn. And I don't think their king can capture that. So, take one final look at it. Capture. Capture. Pawn pushes forward. If this pawn pushes forward, then our king would have to move here to attack it. And then we would have stopped that pawn. So it looks like that works. And we see now it's a very small square of the pawn here. And the king could go here, but not be in that small square, and the pawn would promote. All right, on to the next one. These are pretty interesting. These simplification problems are a lot of rook and pawn endgames, which do occur probably more frequently than maybe any other endgames. So, these videos are these problems, puzzles with rook and pawn endgames are well worth taking a look at. Okay, the king has moved forward to protect pawn and rook here, which we were attacking. What now? Oh, okay. Well, another great example why it pays to look at checks first. Checks, captures, and threats in that order. In this case, a check and a capture seem to be working together here. We do both. So how can we check? Obviously the only thing to do is to capture this pawn, delivering a check. If the king moves back, then we'll pick off the rook. So blocking with the rook would probably be the best move. So capture with check. Rook blocks. We take the rook. The king captures. And now we have a pawn majority here. So we can push our pawn in the center, the unopposed pawn. If there's a capture, we recapture, and we'll have a passed pawn over here. And the king will either have to run over to stop that pawn, then we can pick this one off, and maybe go after this pawn over here. So let's take a look at it. Now we push this forward, creating a passed pawn over here. And this is pretty much winning, because if the pawn captures, well, then we just go ahead and recapture. And now we have this passed F pawn over here. The king will have to worry about that. And if we start pushing that, well, then if he goes to stop it, we just pick this off. Then we could go after this, move out of the way, and start marching this pawn. But that is quite a few moves. So we have to see what our opponent would do in the meantime. So if we have a capture, capture, if the king runs over to stop that, then we can take, and it'll take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 moves to promote. And then what can the king do? I don't think there's much here. He can move 1, but at that point we can press this other pawn forward. I think we're good. So you can check that out further if you would like on your own. But for now, let's move on to the next problem. The king has jumped forward here, grabbing the opposition, which a lot of times can be very important in endgames, because the black king opposing the white king here, it does not allow the king to move forward. So both kings are kind of stopping one another. The problem is we can capture with check here. So another great example. We capture with check. The king can't move back, or we pick off the rook. So the rook will have to block. We take, king takes, and now we can move over here, try and go up here after these pawns, and the black king will have to stop this passed pawn over here. And that's all the further they're going to show you, because the king will have to capture, and that will allow us to move over here. The black king will have to spend his time running over to stop the A pawn over here, and that will give us time to infiltrate up into the position, knock out these pawns, and promote our own. So this is a very good pattern to recognize a strategy where you have this extra queenside pawn, and the king will have to run over there to stop that, and that gives you time to knock out the opposing pawns and promote yours on the other side of the board. All right, 5 more problems to go. we just had a bishop jump forward here attacking our queen. If that queen moves, the rook could be captured. But we're trying to simplify down. So if we do that, we could let our queen remain under attack here. Let's see if that works. If we go after the rook, maybe, then we're attacking their queen. Now, if their queen decides to capture, well, then we can recapture. All right, and this is where it gets a little bit trickier when you're trying to simplify down into a one endgame. And I've mentioned this before. If you do problems that are too complicated, it works more on your pattern, or excuse me, on your calculation ability, and a little bit less on your pattern recognition. I mean, obviously there's still patterns to be seen and learned. Okay, let's take one more look at that. Capture. If they take our queen, we take their queen. If they capture, we get their bishop. If the queen captures, then we capture. If they attack our queen, okay, that looks like that works. So capture, capture. The thing that helps us here is now we can capture with check, and that gives us time because he has to respond to that. It gives us time to go ahead in material here. So pawns are even, but now we have an extra bishop, and that should be enough to win. Okay, 4 more problems. Pawn has pushed forward, attacking our queen. And I had a viewer ask about weak squares and weak color complexes. This would be a good example of a weak color complex. By pushing this pawn and not having a fianchettoed bishop on g7, now there are weak squares, around the king here, possibly all these dark squares that are highlighted now. So if there's a way we can take advantage of that, maybe that would help us. But our queen is under attack, and if we're trying to simplify down, we probably have to move our queen unless there's a way to counterattack their king or their queen. But if we move our bishop up here, they can take our queen. The pawns will be wrecked, but when we capture their queen, our bishop will be captured. So maybe instead we have to move the queen. I don't see any good checks. If we look at checks, captures, and threats, if the queen captures, the king will just capture, and we don't have a good follow-up after that. So maybe we need to look at captures. We have 2 attackers here on the knight and only 1 defender, the queen, so that looks to be the way to go. So if we capture with our queen, and we're also threatening to attack here, so the queen would probably capture, bishop would capture, and if our bishop is attacked, it can just retreat back. So hopefully you found this problem. Pause at any time, try and solve as much in your head as possible, nice and slow on the first time through your puzzle, and then if you go back through these problems, you can try and look at them and solve them faster. All right, now we have an attack, so let's trade. We're trying to simplify down. They'll have to take that. We could now trade off even more pieces by knocking out the bishop. After they take our queen, we can take the bishop. 3 more problems to go. All right, the king has stepped closer to the center to defend this pawn, which is under attack by our rook. It was defended by this rook. But now if we take... Okay, when you're trying to simplify down, first thing you have to do is look at both sides, see how much material each side has. So we have 5 pawns versus 3 pawns. So we're behind by 2 pawns. But we have what here? Rook for rook, knight for knight. We have a rook versus bishop here. So material is even if you count up the material. 5 points for rooks, 3 points for the knight and bishops, and then 1 point for the pawns. So how can we trade down, simplifying into an advantage here? Well, any checks? I don't see any good checks at the moment. If we capture... Oh, this might be pretty good. The knight will be forced to capture. And then we can swing our rook over, attacking knight, and if the knight moves, we get the bishop with check, unless the knight blocks, back where it was here. So take a look at that. Try and calculate as much as you can in your head. If you're ready, here we go. Capture, and now we can attack both of these pieces. And if we take that, it's with a check. So the knight can try and pick this pawn off. The king will have to move first. But then we can go after these pawns over here. So that's a possibility. We could just try and improve the position of our knight, by jumping up here, attacking, and then going after that pawn. All right, 2 more problems to go. Queen has created a battery with the bishop lining up on this pawn, which is well defended at the moment by 3 pieces, 3 defenders, 2 attackers. The rook could potentially capture the bishop, knocking out one of those attackers. All right, I think this problem popped up in one of my previous videos. So what can we do? In that video, I thought the best thing to do, well, first of all, if we follow the pattern, checks, captures, and threats, are there any good checks? The only way to check that king is to go here at the moment. And of course, the queen could just capture us. And I don't see a good follow-up after that. Oh, there's another check. Excuse me. We could check over here. So maybe we go that way, delivering a check. If the king moves, then we swing over here, pinning the queen. So that's a possibility. And these queen moves, where the queen swings across the board delivering a check, they can be fatal if you overlook one of these. So always look for those checks first, especially with queens on the board and an open or semi-open king like this. So I'm thinking that is best. We swing over, delivering a check. Now, the queen could block here, but then we can just go after the bishop with our rook. So if we swing over here and the king moves to here, well, then we're able to bring our bishop up. So this looks to be the best move. All right. And as I was saying, now we can just trade off queens and then pick off the bishop. So capture with check, go after the bishop, and we're just up a bishop here. Pawns are equal. We're about to go after this other pawn. If the rook tries to defend, we can blockade with our bishop. And we should have enough to win here. Another possibility is swinging down and trying to protect this pawn here. But you get the idea. You can look at that more on your own if you'd like. Let's do the final problem. A rook is swung over, attacking our queen. Now we are also attacking their queen. So because we are attacking their queen with our bishop, we have an option here. We don't have to move our queen. And we want to simplify down. So let's look at the material. We have 6 pawns versus 5. So we're down by 1 pawn. We each have 2 minor pieces, 2 rooks and a queen. So we need to gain some material advantage when we make these trades. So I'm thinking we just pick off a rook here. Our opponent could go after the bishop. Then what do? We would have to move our queen again to here. All right, so maybe we just go after their queen right away. That could be a better move. Instead of giving up our queen first, maybe we take their queen first. If they take ours, then we capture their rook. So that's probably the best way to go. We don't want to give them a possibility of keeping the queen on the board. So let's knock the queen out first. All right, now we can go after the rook, and they will just get a bishop. And so then we'll be ahead in material in the end game here. And we have this knight as well. So, yeah, we would be winning ahead, enough material to be winning. And we're attacking their other knight here. So, good for us, bad for them. All right. Feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy hearing from viewers and subscribers. Let me know if there's anything you would like to see in the future. Like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.